No, your eyes do not deceive you. I am playing Destiny 1 in today's video. Welcome, Guardians. It's your boy Wyatt, aka Wombo Combo, but don't worry, we're not talking about Destiny 1 a whole lot. This does pertain to Destiny 2. I am going to talk about today my thoughts on Crotas End and the possibility of it returning as a raid and or dungeon, and why it's a bit of a conundrum. What spawned me wanting to make this video today was I watched a video of Dado's talking about his thoughts on the raids returning. It's an older video, but I rewatched it, and he made some really key points that made me think about, well, shoot, what do I think about Crotas End possibly coming back? As you know, they've already brought back Vault of Glass to D2, King's Fall to D2, and this year, 2023, with Lightfall, they're going to bring back another raid, presumably Wrath of the Machine. If I had to wager, if I were a betting man, I would say it's probably Wrath of the Machine. Now, the reason this is an interesting topic to me is because Dado said in his video that while they might bring it back as a dungeon, they might also bring it back as a raid, and he would prefer that they bring it back as a raid. And I was so torn on whether I'd want it back as a dungeon or back as a raid. Now, in the background footage, you're just watching me do a solo Crota run after relearning how to play Destiny 1, adjusting some of my gear, and using Risk Runner's older, better, cooler brother that puts Risk Runner to shame, and remembering that you can't mantle on ledges. I got my Crotas End solo run done, and I was very proud of myself. I haven't played D1 in a while, but I occasionally come back to visit just to check up on the game. It is a classic in my eyes. And after getting seasick for the first 20 or 30 minutes of me playing, my eyes finally adjusted to the god-awful 30 frames per second. Now, part of what's so interesting about this conversation to me, there's a couple key reasons why I want to make this point, which is that I personally feel like it should come back as a dungeon, not a raid. After playing this raid by myself and soloing it, after having not played in probably years, or at least the raid, I visit PvP every once in a while in D1, I just don't see where they could improve or make it more difficult to the point where it wouldn't be a 20-minute run. I mean, legitimately, like, I think of Golgoroth, right? The change they made to Golgoroth, so you can't kill him on the first pool. You can't just finish him there. The change they made was that you had to do multiple pools, but you can still one-phase Golgoroth. It doesn't alleviate that joy of, like, yes, we got him in one phase, but they did change it in a way where, like, you can't just drop one pool and use that to kill him. You have to use all of the pools to your advantage, but you can still one-phase him, which I like. I think that's a really great change. I just have a hard time thinking of what changes could be made to this raid that would make it difficult for 6 people. Obviously, with the most recent Root of Nightmares contest mode having gone the way it did, I would argue this is even easier than that. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you probably agree. It's really easy, obviously. It can be soloed quite easily. And I did so, in about an hour today. But yeah, I just don't know where they could improve. This raid feels like a D2 dungeon feels. Replaying it and doing it all by myself, I just got that feeling of like, yeah, this is more of a dungeon than a raid. I just don't get that raid feeling. It doesn't quite have the scale of a raid. It feels like a dungeon to me. And while a lot of people have the argument of, well, I want my friends to experience it. I want, people who have never played it to be able to experience Crotas End the raid. I just don't think that it would be a good experience because I'm in the same boat. I have friends that never played D1, or if they did, they didn't do this raid. And while I would love to experience this raid with them, I'd rather say, hey, why don't we all go back to D1 and do the raid together, then have it be brought to D2 as a raid and be a disappointment, and have them be like, yeah, no wonder this is a joke. You know what I mean? I think it just fits well as a dungeon. It's suited for 3 people. I mean, obviously they'd have to rework the mechanics a little bit in order for it to function the way it's supposed to with 3 people, rather than just having one person sword fly across and do the whole encounter on bridge, for example. But it just suits 3 people, I feel like. You know, you have 2 people shooting down Crota's shield, 1 person with the sword. That's perfect. On the bridge building encounter, I feel like it's the same concept. Obviously, like I said, you'd have to change the mechanics a little bit, but I just feel like it is more suited for 3 Guardians than 6. I feel like 6 would make it too much of a cakewalk. I really don't know what they could do other than, like, adding a completely new encounter between, like, bridge and Crota, or between, you know, the lamps and the bridge. Like, without having to rebuild an entire encounter, what could they do to make this more difficult? It's beyond me. I really don't know. It doesn't seem like there's much they could do. But that being said, I also totally understand the argument of, well, it was meant for 6 people, and I want to experience it with 6 people. But I just think it holds up well for D1. I think get some friends, go back and play D1. Obviously, it's not on PC, unfortunately, and I would love a remaster of the game. Not just on PC, but on Xbox and PS5 as well, with a higher frame rate would be amazing. And I would love to do that. I would love to do this raid with people who have never done it in D1. But I think as a raid in D2, it just wouldn't hold up. And I feel like 3 people in this arena would be so much fun. And then on top of that, I really enjoyed the solo Crota run. It feels just like a solo dungeon from D2. It really does. It just reminds me of my solo flawless Spire of the Watcher, or my solo flawless Prophecy, like about the same amount of time and about the same amount of scale. The dungeons don't feel as big as the raid, and I feel like that holds up here as well. That's a truth. It's just not that big, and I think that's okay. I think that works in the arena of a dungeon rather than a raid. Those are some of my thoughts on why it should come back as a dungeon and not a raid, in my opinion. But yeah, I was very proud of this run. I spent, like I said, about an hour refreshing my memory on how a lot of these mechanics work. While most things have remained the same, there were a few cheeses that I remember doing back in the day when I did my solo Crota run in Destiny 1 way long ago, that don't work anymore. So I had to find a way around those. But this is such an enjoyable, currently, raid that I do want to return. I absolutely want it to return. I've heard some sentiment of like, well, they just shouldn't bring it back at all. It's just not that great. It's kind of a joke. I think they could make some minor improvements to it, of course, and make it, you know, higher ad density, maybe a little tougher ads with how powerful we are, and changing the mechanics a little bit. But I think it would work so well as a dungeon, and I would love to see it return as a dungeon. But yeah, I really enjoyed doing this today. I had some close calls. I had to 3-phase Crota, and I forgot that on, you know, if you don't get them in the first 2 phases, it spawns in some yellow bar ogres. That gave me a good jump scare. I had to take care of them. But yeah, I mean, just the hardest, the part that gave me the most trouble here was the bridge, and not because the bridge is inherently difficult, but just because the way you have to do it now to work around only being one person is a bit time consuming. It's not even difficult, you just have to fly across, kill a sword bearer, it'll wipe you because you lose your sword, and then you self-res and do it again, and then you have to get your super back. So you spend a bunch of time killing ads to pick up another sword to do it again over and over and over until you get to the sword bearers on the other side, and you kill all of them, which spawns in a wave of ads, which definitely gave me some trouble a couple times, for you to then take out and continue on. But yeah, I mean, this is what a dungeon should feel like. It felt great to play this today. It was just the right level of difficulty for me. Like, coming back in, it wasn't too difficult, but it wasn't easy by any means. Well, I guess I'm kidding myself a little bit. It was fairly easy. I got it done in about an hour, having not played in so long. So obviously I'd want them to make it more difficult, but I think it would hold up super well as a dungeon. And I would love to play this with my friend Jack, who has never experienced it, or my friend Joey, for that matter. I don't think he has. I think my friend Derek has played it, but yeah, it would just mean a lot to me to have it return. I do have very fond memories of this raid, but I think it should return as a dungeon, not as a raid. Those are just kind of my thoughts on that. But definitely let me know what you guys think down below. Do you want Crotas End to return? Do you think it should return? Or, do you think it should stay in D1 where it belongs? And then if you do want it to return, are you in the camp of it should be a raid, a full raid with 6 people like it was in D1? Or are you like, yeah, I would love this as a dungeon. It's not super long. I don't know what they could do to make it more difficult for 6 people. Bring it back as a dungeon, and I'd be okay with that. I know I would be. I would love this as a dungeon in D2. So anyways, guys, I appreciate you watching. And yeah, let me know your thoughts down below, and I'll catch you next time. Peace. Okay, one last thing as a little editor's note. Can we talk about D1 drip? Man, look at my hunter. Look at how sexy my hunter is. The drip from D1, man. I swear, D2 just doesn't hit the same. I look so good in D1. Look at my Titan. Look at that Twilight Garrison. I miss you, baby. Anyways, that was it. D1 drip, goated. Peace.